Well, we don't get visitors in the workshop very often, but today we've got a very special guest. Today, Natasha has set up a program on setting up your workshop, and I think you're going to be really intrigued with it. Natasha?
Thanks, Colin. When you start setting up your very first own workshop, there are a few things that you want to keep in mind. Here are some of them. Have you decided to transform your garage, shed, basement, or spare room into a wood shop? Woodwork Web presents Building Your Workshop. First, make sure your chosen space has good bones. You'll need an entrance with adequate clearance, enough lighting, electrical power, and sufficient outlets, as well as strategies for ventilation and dust collection.
The size of the entrance or exit to your workshop. And I recommend having a doorway at least 32 inches. Now, if you already are using a garage and you have a garage door, you're one of the lucky ones. For those of us that are working in another kind of a building, I recommend 32 inches because that's the size that a number of manufacturers that are making equipment are using as their sort of standard, so they'll make it just a little bit under 32 inches. And the reason for that is in the house manufacturing, one of the kind of de facto standards for an entrance, an indoor-outdoor entrance, is a minimum of 32 inches, and that's why they picked that standard. Let's measure a machine so I can show you different sizes, but manufacturers of this kind of machinery know that certain styles of machinery that they're making for a home woodworker or an amateur type woodworker, and this is an exact example of that. And this machine, when you measure it, it's just under 32 inches, and it's designed not for commercial use, but for part-time or home woodworker kind of use. And of course, they designed it so that it would fit nicely in a 32-inch wide door. One of the things I really like in a workshop is natural light. In a moment, I'm going to show you the lighting, but I also have two very large daylight windows, and I made sure that I didn't block those off in any way so that I get as much ambient light coming in as I can get. Big large windows with daylight coming in, and it augments the internal light that I have. I don't want to mix light. I don't want to have, say, tungsten light, which can be very yellow on one side, and daylight on another. So what I've done is I've taken out all of the tungsten lighting that was here and reinstalled it with fluorescent tubes, and the fluorescent tubes that I installed are daylight equivalent. Now, as woodworkers, of course, we're always using power tools, so obviously power is very important to us. When I set up the shop, I had an electrician come in and set up a few more plugs for me. I also had them convert some of my plugs to 220 volts for my bigger tools like my jointer and table saw and planer. For my 110 volt plug-ins, what he suggested was to make it as convenient as possible for me to plug and unplug machines, and that really made a lot of sense to me. He said install some good quality power bars, preferably with an off-on switch so that you can cut all the power to everything. He said you can plug a few tools into them, but because you're working alone, you're mostly only going to be using one tool at a time, so you're not going to overload anything, but you're going to make it convenient to plug and unplug tools, because for many tools that we're changing bits and blades in, we want to unplug them before we do that. So make it as convenient as possible for your power to plug and unplug.
Confident in the qualities of your chosen space, place your largest and most often used equipment around the room in a way that aligns with available electrical outlets to cut down on sprawling extension cords. Place these pieces in a way that creates an intuitive workflow so that you can move to each new piece of equipment as your project progresses. If your entrance doesn't provide enough clearance to bring in full-size pieces of lumber, consider creating a cut station outside the workshop itself. Remember to leave some space for assembly, especially if you're working on larger projects.
The way I designed my work area is that through my indoor-outdoor, through my egress, I would bring in lumber. And normally the first thing that I do with lumber, because a lot of it is rough cut, and even if it isn't, I still need to usually joint one or two edges. So I go immediately to my jointer, and after that I'll have a couple of choices of machines. I'll either be taking it to my table saw, which is right here, or I could use my planer, which is right here. I can slide that out from the wall. The beauty of having all of these three machines very close is my dust collection fits in this, or is in this 3 square feet or 4 square foot area. So all of my dusty parts and dusty tools are in this close proximity, which makes it easier for me to plug and unplug dust collection and to keep my wood confined to this area so that I get the bulk of that done in this rough area.
Once you have the outline of your workshop created with those larger pieces, fill in the blanks with smaller or less frequently used equipment. Take advantage of space beneath and above work tables and equipment for storage. Keep items where they will be most often used. Clear containers or open shelving will allow you to see and access stored items. To make your space more flexible, mount larger pieces on locking casters so that they're easier to rearrange.
One of the things that will strike you if you came into my workshop is that almost all of my storage is off the floor. I don't like to have anything on the floor because it inhibits cleaning, and I like to keep a fairly clean workshop. So all of my tools, almost everything that I have, is stored above. Let me show you a couple other shots. And from this side of the shop, the same thing. More cupboards down here, and more cupboards here. And you already know that I keep my clamps up off the floor. They're mounted on the wall. Let's look at the other side over here. You don't get to see very often because there's really not much to see over here. Of course, you'll recognize my tool cabinet over here. And it is a floor standing unit. It has drawers on the lower side and my hand tools up top. This is where I store my router bits, right in here. And further along, for those of you who remember, this was my library cabinet that I keep all of my books and papers and plans and things in. So I try and keep everything off the floor as much as I can. Almost everything on the floor is on wheels so that I can move it out of the way so that I can keep my workspace as clean and uncluttered as possible.
As you plan and prepare your workshop, keep in mind the potential of your chosen space and the projects you undertake. Beyond safety, the most important component of organizing your own workshop is to make sure that it will provide the space, storage, and workflow that you need to do your work. A woodworker who uses hand tools to create small-scale carvings will not need the same equipment, workflow, or storage as one whose primary projects involve constructing large pieces of furniture. In the end, the goal is to build a workshop that works for you.
Natasha's absolutely right. There's no right or wrong way of making a workshop. You really need to make it work for you. But the key that I always say is try and make it as convenient as possible for yourself. And the reason for that is if it's convenient for you to do things, it'll be safer for you to work within. Safer to unplug tools, for example. Safer to keep your workshop clean and uncluttered so that you're not tripping over things and accidentally hurting yourself. There's all sorts of things that you can do, and it's a good idea to take time once in a while to go around and sort of reconfigure things and make them a little bit easier and a little bit more convenient for yourself. So thanks, Natasha, for giving us a refreshing look at how to work and how to set up your own workshop. I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.